Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, May 24th, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael Wednesday, and this is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Mike Hanna, former Jerusalem bureau chief for CNN, independent news presenter and consultant for Al Jazeera and many other places. We're going to be talking about Trump in Saudi Arabia, Trump in Arabia, a new peace plan for the Middle East, which is actually an old Arab initiative from 2003 that is getting new life breathed in it. We'll discuss that, fallouts of the terror attacks in Manchester, 22 dead, and why covering these attacks the way we cover them plays precisely into ISIS's media strategy, and why we got to stop doing that. The Trump budget, it's a perfect Republican budget. Fantasy math and moral obscenity coming through, part of their core brand proposition. Mike Flynn, he wants to plead the fifth, but you can't do that if you're an LLC. Surprised that Republicans have not fixed that problem already. Sorry, Mike. Things are looking tough for you. And new transcripts of Donald Trump talking with President Duterte of the Philippines about North Korea, about nukes, and it's the sort of high-minded and comforting conversation you'd expect from those two gentlemen. And new arrest in Brazil in a World Cup bribery case, bringing more heat on the right-wing government of Michel Temer, who, of course, was instrumental in getting rid of Dilma Rousseff just a little bit over a year ago for corruption, even as they are bringing new charges against former President Lula. We'll get to that. I'm back from Detroit. A lot of people were tweeting me about that and talking about how I was off at a brand conference during such an important news cycle, and fair enough. And I also got into a spat with some guy named, what's his name, Matt?
John Podhoretz.
John Podhoretz. I might be worse than the Holocaust, according to a guy named John Podhoretz.
Well, we just can't be sure if you are or not.
We can't be sure. Well, I mean, I guess we can't
withhold judgment.
You don't know, man.
You can be pretty sure.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome, Michael.
I would like to quote tweet that. Let's just get to this sound really briefly before we get to Mike Hanna. And I feel like Sam because I've misplaced my sound sheet. This is a first. I will take yours, Matt. Thank you. So you have to wonder, how does a man like the Pope deal with meeting with Trump? Not just Trump, also both of his girlfriend and his wife, Ivanka and Melania, as well as this hanger-on Jared, who I guess isn't in this picture. In the full picture,
He's cropped out.
he's cropped Jared out. He's a total loser. The Pope looks really happy to be meeting them, and Trump is sort of weirdly postured there. But I think that the way the Pope, and as I said, I've seen the Dalai Lama actually do this. The one thing that these guys seem to allow themselves is they go for weight jokes. So Trump is there. He's shaking hands with the Pope, along with Melania and Ivanka. And the Pope goes for some solid weight material on the president. Let's check this out.
Nice to meet you.
This one isn't dope. Yeah, sorry.
What do you give him to eat? Is it
So, yeah, the Pope goes, what are you giving him to eat? Melania goes, pizza. He's like, yeah, pizza.
Well, basically, the Pope says potica, which is a Slovenian sort of sweet roll type of thing. And apparently that's what Melania said, potica. And then Trump says pizza?
Pizza? Everyone's
And just
having
smiles.
fun. Everyone's enjoying themselves.
She didn't seem to understand what he was getting at either.
No. And then the translator was like, the Pope is making a fat joke about your husband.
No, I think she knew he was making a joke because she responds before the translators even translated it.
All right. But Trump, let's see. Maybe it will flip in a day. I watched several years ago, Artie Lang roasted Trump in Atlantic City. And this is one of these great things where you're like, now this guy's the president. And Artie had some great material. Artie was like, I remember one thing, he was clearly really drunk when he was up there. And he goes up there and he goes, you know what you should say to your barber, Donald? You're fired, right? And then he said, there's a lot of the hotels in Atlantic City are owned by the Borgata family. And so Artie said, you know, Donald apparently drove his daughter around Atlantic City and said, every building in this town is going to be named after you. He goes, which is really sweet and not true unless she marries a member of the Borgata family. And at the time, Trump was kind of like, yeah, we're laughing. We're having a good time. And then a year later, he was on Howard Stern. He's like, I hate this guy. He's a loser. To Artie while he was in studio. So maybe in a year when he has a follow-up meeting with the Pope, he'll hold a grudge. We shall see. We'll be right back with Mike Hanna on the Majority Report.
Equal rights and justice for all, rise and never fall. Tell them, say, boom, what they gonna do when none for them not true. Say what they gonna do, them get slew, yeah. Who do you think you are? We're living in a small world. As wicked as you think you are, we're living in a small world. As bad as you think you are, we're living in a small world. As you think you are, we living in the one your name. Alright, that day will come when I stand and see all those wicked men in the fire getting burned. That day will come when they will try to escape and there will be nowhere to run. That day will come when I shall see they handing over bombs and bayonets and bullets and guns. That day will come when Emperor Selassie shall rise the wall of the ghettos, loot them from out of the slum, yeah. And the day I would love to see their face for all those evil they do to the human race and try to take things out of place, run away to space, shoot them in the air. After one judgment you are gonna get the taste when them find out that them can't.
Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Mike Hanna. He served as the Jerusalem bureau chief for CNN. He's now a news presenter and UN correspondent for Al Jazeera. Mike, how are you doing?
Very well indeed. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for joining us again. I wanted to get your thoughts on Donald Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. There's still something just kind of innately surreal for many of us about just even the idea of him taking a trip like this, him getting the special halal ketchup and steak special, and talking with King Salman. But, you know, what struck me is that in some ways, you know, there's a natural continuity between Donald Trump and who he is and who the Saudi royal family are. There's certainly a great interest in wealth. There's certainly a great interest in ornate and very complex building projects and gold and everything else of sort of, fusing kind of religion, late stage capitalism, and apparently, rhetorically, an opposition to terrorism. None of the kind of larger sort of questions about the Saudis' role in funding fundamentalism and different groups across the region were really addressed. And Trump seemed quite at home, and at home in a way that many American presidents have been at home in Saudi, in spite of the many challenges in that relationship.
Well, you left out as well, perhaps, common taste in interior decorating. But the key, all of what you say there is, completely correct. That there does seem to be some kind of connection that is particularly strong between Donald Trump and the Saudi leadership. But the other thing you did not mention, which is crucial to all of that, is a common enmity towards Iran. Right. There was nothing that angered the Saudi leadership more than the Obama administration's position on Iran. The signing of the Iranian nuclear deal was a great thorn in the Saudi side. So certainly this, at present, is the glue that keeps it all together. And introducing the other points, maybe a bit early of the Trump trip, of course, Israel. Once again, Israel, Donald Trump, Saudi, many, many differences in many, many ways, but all bound by one constant denominator, and that is an opposition to Iran. And perhaps that particular point is something that lies behind the reason for this entire trip, a very, very strange trip, first foreign trip to be taken by a U.S. president. Normal destinations, obviously the old allies in Europe, particularly Britain, maybe even just across the border to
Mexico
Canada. But the idea of taking a first trip on this massive Middle Eastern sweep, going to the world's major religions, as Trump's spokespeople put it, is something that is unprecedented.
Yeah, let's go more into detail on Iran. That's exactly right. So one of the things that Trump campaigned on, even with foreign policy, and this sort of drain the swamp thing, and obviously during the campaign it was entirely contradictory as well, because on one hand he would say we need to bomb the shit out of ISIS, and then on the other hand he would sort of say we really need to radically recalibrate and readjust our engagement in the world. One area where he rhetorically was a very typical Republican, and there would be very little daylight between like him and someone like Marco Rubio, was with Iran. So you're seeing an office now that in many ways he's conforming to type on foreign policy with a place like Saudi Arabia, with military action in Syria, and he's heightening and, pivoting firmly away from the kind of slight reform in the Obama administration's approach to Iran, or, maybe more substantive reform. But the contrast is, and what makes this just sort of almost embarrassing, is that at the same time he's there in Saudi Arabia and talking with the leaders of the Gulf states who have very problematic records, to say the least, on funding terrorist groups, on human rights, on everything else, Iran just overwhelmingly reelected Hassan Rouhani, reformist president. Reformist candidates did incredibly well in local elections. We're playing some brief footage here of people in Tehran responding to Rouhani's victory. And you see, just even in this footage, Iran is, complicated. We can take that down now. Has many problems of its own, obviously, but within its limited context, it actually is moving forward in terms of reforms. It is synchronized with us in terms of a group like IS, more so than the Saudis or the Gulf. So what's happening inside Iran really enhances just how kind of extreme this posture is, but it's a mainstream U.S. posture. It's not unique to Trump at all.
Well, I think there's a number of points to be made here. Number one, everybody seems to forget that the ISIL is a Sunni organization. As such, it is an enemy of Iran. It is just beyond all logic to see Iran, Shia Iran, as a supporter of a Sunni fundamentalist movement. That's point number one.
Right.
Point number two is that even the Trump administration has been forced into recognizing that Iran has kept to its side of the nuclear deal. Just a few weeks ago, the Foreign Secretary Rex Tillerson signed off on the fact that, yes, Iran has stuck to its agreement. And a week ago, the U.S. added, as required in terms of the legislation, another 6 months of the Iranian deal recognizing the Iranian deal and its nuclear efforts to dampen its nuclear ambitions. Now, that, of course, as everybody points out, is a temporary thing. It's every 6 months. The Trump administration is very clear that it's continuing its review of whether or not Iran is standing by its nuclear commitments. But not many people, and certainly none in the Trump administration, actually talk about those details. Trump is very, very praising of Saudi Arabia, which everybody knows provided the bulk of the 9/11 attackers. There are all sorts of inconsistencies in terms of a long-term position being taken by the Trump administration. We're used to the flipping now. The things that he said on his campaign, very few of them are being carried out in this administration. There's still a lip service played to some, but in others there's a complete reversal. To take a look at his policy on North Korea, all of a sudden Donald Trump is saying, hey, I'm prepared to meet that guy. There does seem to be as well a natural affinity in terms of expressed opinions by Donald Trump towards strong-arm leaders. Right. They're to look at his relationship with the president of Egypt, for example, outreachings to people who many others would see as unacceptable strong-armed leaders who are attempting to dismantle human rights within the countries they control. So that's another part of the Trump personality, perhaps. He does, it seems, tend towards those leaders who are strong-armed. And he's made very clear as well, and he's made clear on this trip, we are not there to lecture, he says. A clear dib at the Obama administration, which
and
based
Bush,
its foreign
too.
policy on spreading democracy, as it put it.
Yeah, I mean, but then the question becomes specifically with regards to Iran and Middle East, and maybe it's funny, yeah, maybe the real problem that Trump has with Hassan Rouhani is that Rouhani has too good a human rights rhetoric, and maybe if we could just get a new Iranian leader who wanted to start locking women up for going to soccer games again, we could be cool, but. On the other hand, I mean, there is the sort of just unique...
Given his behavior to some leaders with atrocious human rights records.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but I think, on the other hand, the relationship with Saudi is so long-standing and the hostility to Iran is so long-standing that in some ways it seems like, the relationship with Saudi Arabia is predicated on we just had a major arms deal that was facilitated by Jared Kushner, and there's always oil. So, is this also just the sort of, again, with the specific bizarre Trump language and verbiage and just kind of personal oddness, is this just a revert to type for, this looks a lot like what George W. Bush was talking about with regard to Saudi Arabia and Iran as well?
Well, yes, but let's be very clear here is that the Trump policy as outlined at the moment towards Saudi Arabia in terms of basics doesn't veer that much from previous U.S. administrations. There has always been that relationship with Saudi because of the reliance on oil, because of the insistence on propping up what remained of any form of Middle East normalization. Sure, the Israelis get massive sums from the U.S. every year in terms of grants and military aid, but so did the Saudis before.
Right.
This particular sum, though, that was negotiated by Jared Kushner is something of a one-off. It's also a massive amount of money, and it also involves weaponry that previous administrations would not give to the Saudis, mainly because the Israelis objected to the Saudis having more advanced weaponry than they had. They argued that giving F-35s, for example, would upset the balance of power within the Middle East. Now, Kushner somehow got away with that. So contained within this recent deal that he negotiated, there is some very advanced weaponry which is going over to the Saudis, and there hasn't been a whisper of anger or opposition from the Israelis, who under an Obama administration, this deal had been done, would have been screaming loudly from the rooftops.
Livid, right. Well, I had actually heard, Mike, and I can't confirm this, but I had heard that Jared had actually asked if he could do that for his bat mitzvah. So maybe that's why. But I think that, okay, so then actually that's the other sort of irony, though, and we'll move to Israel in a moment. We know that despite not having official diplomatic recognition and despite sort of public condemnations, that traditional U.S. approach to the Middle East, which is based on Saudi Arabia and Israel as the kind of two sort of core allies and fulcrums in that region, that The Saudis and the Israelis actually share a lot of synchronized interests as well. They share a similar, contempt for Iran. That's an ongoing dynamic. The Saudis and others can condemn and, promote anti-Semitic propaganda and everything else, but it's not really a core mission of Gulf foreign policy to improve Palestinian human rights. I think that's much more sort of rhetorical than substantial, although maybe for some of the religious elements in Saudi Arabia, it's important, but I don't think as kind of a matter of policy orientation. So then you have this odd parallel development that basically Donald Trump, while on one hand appointing a very extreme far-right ambassador to Israel, while condemning the Obama administration for not doing everything it could to back Israel at all times, at the same time is actually supposedly resurrecting an old peace plan from about 2003 that was put together in Saudi Arabia that essentially in kind of broad strokes would, in exchange for a legitimate Palestinian state on 67 borders, a withdrawal from the West Bank, a easing of restrictions on Gaza, moving towards a complete kind of continuous and actual Palestinian state, there would be complete Arab recognition of Israel. There would be trade agreements implemented immediately. Really the kind of deal that someone like, a Shimon Peres would talk about in the 1990s in the sort of, heyday of the kind of, peace developments and two-state solution when people were optimistic about that. It does seem like it would appeal to Trump's grandiosity that he's the only person that could do this. And the Israelis, as you say, they can't react to the Trump administration in the same way they could to the Obama administration because there's so much more kind of inbuilt goodwill and, synchronized far-right politics. But at the same time, it seems pretty unbelievable that the Israeli government, as it's presently constituted, would ever do any type of significant settlement dismantling, which would be required for a deal like that.
Well, let's just get back to the deal. There's a lot of points there. The Arab plan, or the Saudi plan, as it was called back in 2002, in fact, drawn up by the Crown Prince, endorsed by the Arab League, and repeatedly endorsed, incidentally, at subsequent meetings by the Arab leaders as recently as this year. Now, the problem with the plan is that it has been the only plan that's lasted on the table. It's been gathering dust for the past 15 years. The basic plan is some 10 lines, as you point out. It's basically land for peace, based on UN Resolution 194, in fact. And Sharon rejected it outright way back then by saying that, oh, no, this actually now replaces other UN resolutions, so we can't accept that. It's about the only UN resolutions that Ariel Sharon recognized. But the plan itself is basically the only one that's been on the table. Now, subsequent U.S. administrations have kind of accepted it in part. George W. Bush did. Obama's then negotiator, George Mitchell, said, yes, this is a very important part that we will incorporate into our roadmap as he was working on at that particular time. But the problem with it all is that it could not gain traction, as you said, given the nature of Israeli governments that were in place, and given as well, very important to stress, a completely fractured Palestinian administration that had no unity whatsoever on the subject and what it wanted and what it would accept and what it wouldn't accept. All of that being said, though, and perhaps this is where Jared Kushner is coming in again as being the man who many point to this move to dust off this particular plan as a basis for whatever efforts the Trump administration sees. Things have changed since then. The rise of Iran has created that common bondage between Israel, Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and, of course, the rise of ISIL has given a common target for all involved. And importantly, too, there's been an ongoing move within the Arab world. There's always been there. Actually, not to care that much about the Palestinian cause at all. As you said, there hasn't been that much concern about Palestinian human rights over the past decade. There is lip service paid to it, but very little concrete, tangible action taken by Arab nations. So you do have, in a way, perhaps a window of opportunity, or certainly as seen by somebody like Jared Kushner and some of those advising him, that the time is now right, perhaps, for this kind of deal to be reached. That is actually a deal in the end between the U.S., Saudi, and Israel, and actually has nothing to do with the Palestinians whatsoever, who will simply have to come along for the ride because they have no option. And that precisely is the kind of drive that lies behind whatever ideas that Trump might have.
So then, in that sense, does it even matter? Because you talked about Palestinian unity before. Now, Hamas, while still engaging in, when sort of not a laudatory group, obviously, they have pivoted significantly in terms of what kind of deal they're willing to accept in preparation, primarily not because they see any type of negotiating partner on the Israeli side, but because they do want to create some type of unified political structure in Palestine. So does that move by Hamas matter, or is that all essentially irrelevant if this is just going to be a top-down plan? And in fact, if it's a top-down plan, I mean, one would assume it's not going to end up in a very substantive and accomplished way for the Palestinians. It'll be something that's imposed and something that will also have to protect all sorts of Israeli special interests that have grown out of a, decades-long settlement project.
Well, yes, but there's layers upon layer upon layer. The recent moves by Hamas are deeply significant. Mm-hmm. The moves to recognize Israel is a massive step in terms of Hamas dogma. Perhaps it's something that's forced upon them. Perhaps it's something that they realize is inevitable. The change of Hamas leadership also deeply significant. But all of these things may not have any relation to a negotiation process. They would have a relation to any reaction to that negotiation process. But it does make a movement towards a more united Palestine a possibility. That is, if the current Palestinian president, who's now into the 12th year of his 5-year elected term, would be prepared to embrace a democratic process. Hamas was democratically elected in Gaza, regardless what its critics may maintain.
Right.
The Palestinian territory does require an election to give it some kind of authenticity in terms of any process whatsoever. But then we get back to the point that I've been made and that you reiterated. Well, who cares? If this deal is done from the top down, what matters in the long run is reaction. Whether there's full participation or whether there's participation that is paid anything other than some kind of lip service in the wider negotiations, well, that is something that doesn't seem likely at present. And that is something that Israel would be unlikely to indulge in given the makeup of the Israeli government at present, or as it has been for a period of time now. And that is a deeply right-wing government, even in Israeli terms. You have a government that would not accept, as you pointed out, any reduction of settlement levels, that would not accept any concession whatsoever on Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, that would not accept a government that did so. And it has the power within the current makeup of the government to call a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, who has repeatedly shown over recent years that if his power base is threatened, he's quite willing to switch sides in a flash of an eye. He's done that before. He would do it again. What's more important to Benjamin Netanyahu is to maintain a solid power base, regardless of what that entails, regardless of whom that means striking deals with. That is not the kind of recipe that would lead to a deal that would have any meaning for a lasting peace within the region, and certainly not any easing of the condition of Palestinians.
Right, absolutely. So as a final set of questions, we had this really horrific attack in Manchester over the past couple of days at the Ariana Grande concert. And I guess I'm curious from a journalistic perspective. It seems to me that it's quite clear, including according to some of their own documents that they've written, that this type of attack and this type of kind of making life just fundamentally unsettling and anxious and terrifying in a kind of day in and day out basis, maybe a bit different than the Al-Qaeda strategy of some type of spectacular, horrific, mega site attack, but just these kind of ongoing, grinding acts of really extraordinary brutality, that this is sort of the ISIS play. And I'm just wondering, when do we start, and can we, calibrating how we cover these things so we don't reward the very strategy that is so clearly being implemented by these people, which includes, obviously, an incredible media response and obsession with, the people who undertake these types of attacks?
I think that's a very, very important question, and one which we within the media have to continually ask. The creation of oxygen for what groups like ISIL want to achieve, the bubble of publicity that happens within their actions. It's a very difficult line. On one thing, the actions need to be reported. On the other line, that is precisely what ISIL wants. It wants publicity for its acts. But to get back to this current attack, this attack is extreme, even by the horrific levels of ISIL, and certainly far more intense than anything that Al-Qaeda carried out.
Yes.
And I'm not talking in terms of scale. I'm talking in terms of target. This was an attack that was targeted at young kids. Right. It was a concert which everybody knew would be attended by ages from 8 to 17. The bomb itself, from the little that we've heard so far about the actual device, a very sophisticated device, carrying within it ball bearings, nails to create the maximum amount of injuries, and also the attack itself carried out at a most crowded time of the concert, everybody leaving the concert. Now, the sheer cold-blooded nature of this attack is utterly overwhelming.
Right.
And it is, in a way, even groups like Al-Qaeda, in a way, had kind of red lines that would not cross. There was a great awareness in Osama bin Laden's writing about the tipping point in terms of which the drive to create more members would be offset by the action that would drive people away. Now, there's no thought like that in the actions of ISIL, which makes them a far, far more dangerous operator than Al-Qaeda ever was in terms of these isolated attacks. Once again, maybe not in terms of the grand schemes. Nothing can be, in a way, as horrific in scale as the 9/11 attacks or dramatic in its impact. But what remains is the occasional success, if one can use that term, in terms of creating that sense of terror, which is the aim of such attacks. And yes, the reporting of these attacks is something that has got to be tempered, tailored with the knowledge that that is the intention of the attack in the first place. So it is a very, very difficult line to walk along. And in a way, the way in which to report it is, as with all things, as accurately, as honestly, and as unemotionally as possible, difficult as that may be, given the targets such as we have just seen in Manchester.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute obscenity. I mean, I actually thought, from a political perspective, not from a journalistic perspective, but some people, this will be, I'm sure, the first moment that I will do this, and probably the last. I had no problem with, Trump calling them losers. I actually think that that's not a terribly ineffective frame, in the sense of you can be clear and honest about how obscene and horrific and cold-blooded the action is, but at the same time, like, why reify or in any way even indirectly romanticize what this was? It's just a complete obscenity. And I mean, there is a, this also goes back to it. There was a 2004 manifesto written by Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which in many ways is the precursor to ISIL, called The Management of Savagery. And they talk about attacking every single place within the Arab world. That could be, tourist location, hitting targets out of it. And the point is to create this constant sense of desperation, strain, exhaustion, so that you could be hit at any point, anywhere. And so the thinking kind of shifted from, I think you're right, that even bin Laden in a very cynical way had some sense of a kind of public relations aspect of terrorist targets. But there was still that notion too that, you attack great buildings, you attack embassies, you attack places with this symbolic significance. And then this kind of management of savagery it could be, just at that mall in Iowa or anywhere, or obviously something as obscene as this, just so that there's this feeling that we're never settled. And then, of course, that plays into politics here, which are, not helpful from regards to how we actually respond and act in the Middle East, to our press culture, and to clamping down on civil liberties. I'm on an editorial there, but you can jump in whatever way you like.
I think that all of these things are terribly important to talk about it. And let me just add in the way tying our conversation together.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Arab peace plan, the Saudi peace plan. 5 days after that was introduced at an Arab League summit, there was the Pesach bombing, as it was called, in Netanyahu, in Netanya, in Israel.
Yes.
An absolutely horrific attack carried out at a Passover celebration. Dozens of young people injured, killed. Absolutely horrendous, horrific attack that would have no political justification whatsoever. Now, the consequences of that attack had immense ramifications for Palestinians in the years ahead. For a start, they killed the Arab plan at that particular point in the water, because there was going to be no negotiation process in the wake of such attacks. And other subsequent attacks by Palestinian groups, which led as well to horrific counter efforts by the Israelis in very many ways, not least containment, not least ongoing settlement policies, ongoing repression of Palestinians in the territory in which they lived. So you have that. And what you have now with the Manchester attack is, perhaps the optimist might say, well, this is a step too far. This is the beginning of the end for a group that could carry out such a horrific, obscene act. But there's another signal in this attack, and the signal lies in its target. And that is, perhaps ISIL is not intent on gaining support or garnering support. It believes that support will come. It has no fear of turning away any would-be supporters by the ferocity and violence of its acts. And that in itself is a threat, is a major, major threat, that this is an organization that knows no boundaries, and that this is an organization that does not even look forward enough to continuing to bolster its ranks. It doesn't care. The ferocity, the obscenity, the shock effect of its acts are all that is cared about at this particular moment. Some may argue very strongly that's a very short-term way of operating. It means that you are going to run out of members at some stage. You are going to run out of steam. But the period between now and when that happens is something that's an immense threat to all who value any form of human life.
Absolutely. Well, Mike Hanna, as always, even when it's incredibly morbid and depressing, I appreciate your time immensely. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, former Jerusalem bureau chief for CNN, someone whose work you need to follow if you want to understand the world. Mike Hanna, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. A pleasure talking to you as always.
Okay. Talk with you soon. All right, everybody. We're going to go to the fun half now. So we'll cheer up. I only have like 3 ISIS stories planned for the second half, so don't worry about it. You can join the show, 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. You can't see them, but we have visitors with us today. Hi, visitors. Waving to them off camera. Say, a live audience.
Yeah, live audience.
The IMs are open. Become a member of the Majority Report today at majority.fm/become a member. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us all on Twitter. You know how it goes. We'll see you on the flip side.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. Thanks so much and enjoy the show.
So cute. Welcome back to the fun half. Yeah, kids are cute. I'm not disputing.
Well, we can't
you.
just come and say
It's okay. It's an element of mystery for the audience. It's all right.
babies
Not the person
and
who's
puppies.
Babies and puppies. Babies and puppies. I think I give more margin for babies and puppies than Sam does when I host. Which
true.
is about like
Well,
20
no.
seconds. So let's get to the phones.
No, but Sam will talk about his children,
Well,
but
Sam
it has
will
to be a complaint.
kvetch and bitch about
Yeah.
his children, but he won't do like kids are cute. He'll do like
I would quit if Sam
Mila
started doing
called
that.
me and then I had a headache and then she
I can listen
called
to
me
people
and
be
then-
negative about their pets and kids, but I just don't care about them being positive about them.
Yeah, you're really
Yeah, it's so cool.
demented a little bit in that way. And the number of things that you say, I would quit if this happened, is just not accurate. You wouldn't quit.
I do actually. That would be we should create a new segment called the Super Producers Quit List. And we could just add like, what do we have? Talking of children, babies.
I don't know if there's that much stuff. I mean, but those two things. I mean, if
Those two. It's like,
no, you would.
you
You
appreciated
said
people in your
you would
family.
quit,
I would quit.
if you had to put up all the YouTube videos, like when I went.
Oh yeah,
of
on
course.
vacation
That
last
sounds
year.
completely legitimate to me.
Well, you got paid. It's not like, but it's still
it's
time.
like a lot of work.
Matt doesn't
It
get
is
paid.
a lot
He's
of work.
actually-
Thank you, Matt.
Matt's
Thank
part
you.
of like a Chinese worker program. He actually doesn't get paid.
We got paid extra.
Yeah. No.
I'm on leave from Foxconn.
Yeah, he's on leave from Foxconn. His name is, yeah. We pay him in fast downloads. You're calling from an 817 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up, Michael? It's Casey from Texas.
Hey, what's going on? What's on your minds?
Oh, not much. I enjoyed that conversation with you and Mike Hanna.
Thanks.
Just 2 points here. One, it would be great if we could get just a real simple description on like a mainstream show on TV or cable or something about the difference between Sunni and Shia.
Mm-hmm.
And a lighter note, I didn't really pay attention when Obama or Bush went to Israel, but is it normal for the First Lady and maybe the First Daughter to dress up like they're going to a funeral?
Well, that was in Italy. Were they dressed like they were in a funeral in Israel too? I didn't see. I
shit,
didn't.
did I say
No,
Israel? I meant visiting the Pope. Yeah, the
I
Vatican.
think I don't remember.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I don't think it's,
covering your head and dressing like that is traditional Catholic Church. You don't have to do it anymore. But for instance, when my mom was younger, she did have to dress like that and cover her head.
Also makes for a great photo.
Oh man,
Totally
that's
unfair.
interesting.
Totally unfair.
Well, that's all I got. Thanks for the call, or
Yeah.
thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I did not know.
Appreciate it. Okay, let's get to this John Podhoretz thing because it's kind of funny. This was the drama of the morning. So John Podhoretz is the son of a guy, Norman Podhoretz, I believe his name was. And Norman Podhoretz was a very conservative, crazy columnist who kind of went, that old story. He started on the left, he moved to the far right, and he kind of reached his peak in the 80s, and apparently he was, kind of humorless, sanctimonious guy, big supporter of Ronald Reagan. And he bequeathed his journalistic empire to his son, this guy, John Podhoretz, who has been, many people say in D.C. that he's very funny on Twitter. That's mostly what he's known for. He's also a journalist and editor. And
They say he's funny on Twitter?
They say he's funny. In fact, if you look up John Podhoretz, I think he's named on some type of funny Twitter list.
Him and
which
Borowitz.
is one of the funniest things. He actually might make Andy Borowitz look funny. So John Podhoretz, this morning, he tweeted this out. Some idiot Dem congressman of Morning Joe says he's never seen anything more hateful than the Trump budget. Oh, how about the Holocaust? Now, I got to be honest with you. When I saw this, and this was brought to my attention by Matt Binder, my former co-pilot on the Majority Report, so shout out to Matt. He, you can, go to mine first. Oh, you don't have mine? Okay. Well, can you double click on it so it's bigger? Okay. Well, it's not on screen yet, though, right? Okay, great. So I actually thought to myself when I saw this, I was like, I think that this is actually the first I mean, I'm not a big John Podhoretz follower, so maybe he's actually a genius, although I really doubt it. And I thought to myself, this is one of the smartest things I've ever seen this guy do, because that is an achievable benchmark for the Republican Party. Not as bad as the Holocaust. That's doable. Strip millions of people off of their health insurance. Not as bad as the Holocaust. Introduce new pesticides into waterways and cause kids brain damage. Not as bad as the Holocaust. I think that this is a pragmatic conservative.
Good frame.
Yeah, it's a good frame. And I shared that with John. I wrote, and I guess we can have this up now, shrewd of @JPod Horetz to set a doable benchmark for Republican policies. Not as bad as the Holocaust. Solid work. And then he wrote, the problem with you is pretty much everything. Now, I got to admit, I have not been called one of the funniest people on Twitter, and he is playing on a very deep level here.
He's just escalating quickly.
He's
It's
escalating
Twitter. You got to go
very, very
as fast as possible.
Very quickly. And then Binder, with, I'm sure, hyped up on Red Bull and Mountain Dew and fast food and all of the other disgusting things he puts in his mouth and his slow process of food-assisted suicide, jumps on Twitter and he goes, to be fair, @_Michael Brooks is not as bad as the Holocaust. Which I thought was a very measured point. It's interesting that Matt and I, as like the young, left-wing, bearded people, are maybe being a little bit more calm than John Podhoretz. And John Podhoretz responded with, I wouldn't be too sure about that. Do we have any more? Okay, and then a lot of people went after him, including one of his supporters, which I favorited, who said, John, don't let him get to you, which I thought was really sweet.
John lets people get to him.
Is that John's jam? Because when I first saw this, I was like, he has to be joking. There's no way he could be serious about
I
this.
did a tweet purge about 4 years ago, so it didn't show up in my search. But I remember when I was still living in Fargo, I tweeted something dumb at him, like probably during Obamacare something or decision or another, and I just remember him responding in a hurt and aggrieved way, thinking like, I just sent that off in between bites of my sandwich, and now I've upset John
Did you
Pedart.
follow up with, I just sent that in between bites of my sandwich, man. I was listening to Nixon tapes and I was high. I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings.
He's triggerable is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he's very triggerable. Well, this is like an interesting intermediary zone of conservative pundits, because now like everything is like, you're a cock, you're a fag, you're involved in killing people at Pizzagate or whatever. Like that's the Alex Jones alt-right thing. And now we've got this like weird zone of like a guy who's made it his mission in life, who, I'm sorry, has to say it, was born with literally, now, I mean, in his case, not only everything handed to him, like his job was handed to him. He has no independent capability documented whatsoever. And his main policy mission is to make sure that other people can't get health insurance, which I'm sure he's never had to worry about in his life. But his feelings get hurt really easily. It's interesting.
You know who's really funny on Twitter?
Andy Borowitz.
Matt Bender.
Matt Bender is really funny on Twitter.
I know.
Yeah, Matt Bender knows what he's doing. You're calling from a 417 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 417. Going once. Going twice. All right, let's read through some IMs. Fenton Lover. Hi. I always wondered about the lottery tax. Why are Republicans okay with a lottery tax rate in most places that's over 30%? But yet people that make that kind of money every year pay less tax. It just makes no sense to me. I'm not sure I totally understand that question, but I would
So if
assume,
lottery earnings are taxed at a higher percentage than what normal earnings would be?
Yeah, why they don't have a problem with that? Probably because it disproportionately affects people with low incomes.
Yeah, that's why they don't like it.
Yeah. Neff Hart. My mom was cackling when she heard Nation of Islam Obama. She says that you're really good at it and finally gets why I watch this show. Assalamu alaikum. Who knows? Maybe she'll start watching the show with me. Thanks again, Mr. Obama. You're welcome. Brave-O-Matic. Seeing lots of Trump-Nixon comparisons, but I expect Trump will ultimately be more like Al Capone, who went to prison for tax issues and died morbidly obese with his brain rotted by syphilis. That's true. Capone did go out with tax evasion and syphilis, but I bet he's a lot smarter than Trump. Do you have Nixon, like you're the Nixon expert. Do you have Nixon thoughts about Trump? Like I always say like dumb Watergate and all this stuff. But like other than obviously Trump is not remotely as intelligent as Nixon, but did Nixon have some like self-awareness in all of his paranoia and resentment?
Yeah, to a degree. The thing I always remember is Nixon had a psychiatrist or psychotherapist. Nixon never called him that, or
he had a therapist.
He didn't think of him like that. That was a line
I hope
he
the
tried to
therapist
draw.
didn't think of himself like that either. Hutchnecker.
The therapist's name was something Hutchnecker, and he ended up at the height of the when the Watergate stuff was going down, writing a column that I think it appeared in the Washington Post and New York Times. I'll look this up after I get done saying it, but. Anyway, he published this thing, and nobody knew he was Nixon's doctor. But the column was how we should have medical professionals do screenings of our leaders.
Just saying. Just sort of an offhand observation. Former ditto head. Basic problem with Mnuchin's compassion for taxpayers. It assumes that those who pay taxes should get greater say in how government is run. The implication is that government is for sale and should be, and that those who pay more tax should be getting a greater say in how it's run. I would say they don't think that those people should essentially be paying taxes regardless. Joseph Ballin. Why hasn't there been an outcry over the fact that Trump attacked Assad's forces in Syria for a second time last week, along with Russian troops being sent to southern Syria where the second attack took place? We are looking at World War III if this doesn't stop. Also, Hillary would have started World War III right now if Prez was considering she wanted to kill Russians in those strikes. Okay. I don't know about the second strike in Syria, and don't think we're on the verge of World War III. You're calling from a 651 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, this is Orthodox Retort.
Orthodox what?
Retort.
How are you doing? What's on your minds?
I'd like to challenge the resident North Dakotan coastal elite, Matt,
Yes.
and Silver Spoon Michael on their socialism.
Silver Spoon.
So-
How dare you?
So,
Yes.
you say you're a socialist, but tell me, do you eat food?
Yes. And Matt actually doesn't really
Matt?
eat food.
I eat food. Michael doesn't consider it food, but I think it's good
Yeah,
food.
I don't consider what Matt eats food. So that's a contested area. I eat actual food.
Is this food produced under a capitalist system?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
Yep. Especially Matt's food.
Okay. Do you breathe air?
Mm-hmm.
Air that flows through a capitalist society?
Right.
Okay, so I don't know how you can criticize a system that you happen to live in.
Wait,
Like,
is this the person?
Matt said-
Are you making fun
This
of
is
the guy
satire.
that always IMs Matt with like, how can you say that because you have an iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
You don't even have an iPhone. You don't have an iPhone.
I've got an Android.
Yeah, that's capitalism. All right, I appreciate
yeah,
the
I'm sorry. I
No,
can't,
no,
I
you-
can't
you-
do that anymore. Yeah.
No, I appreciate-
No, I was saying I'm not serious. Jesus.
No,
That would be
that is
sad.
literally that dude's IMs every time. I appreciate the call. So
Just a point on Marx. I think Marx thought capitalism was a stage that you would progress through, on the way to sort of socialist or communist stage of, economic development. So, I mean, the fact that capitalism exists isn't really disproving of socialism.
look at the brains on Matt. He was a smart motherfucker, Matt. I always think I had some beverage to wash this down. I rewatched that movie the other week. So, South Korea elected a new president a couple of weeks ago. A guy who's considered more on the center left in that country. He campaigns on renegotiating and re-engaging diplomatically with North Korea. Over the last several years, South Korea's had very right-wing governments. And they reversed what used to be called the sunshine policy. So in the late 90s, when you had a kind of synchronized approach with the Clinton administration and the next couple of South Korean administrations, there was the notion that you could engage diplomatically with North Korea, that the ultimate goal is actually still reunification, and there were small areas of trade and engagement that were opened up. Obviously, North Korea is playing its own game with sort of continuing its nuclear program and a kind of tit for tat, basically trying to get sanctions relief and sort of ensure its regime's survival. But now you have the kind of challenging dynamic of a South Korean president who has, as I say, has moved to the left. You have Trump still being very belligerent, and maybe you have a China that's running out of patience with North Korea. And that's really the only place that has any leverage over that situation. That's the prime money conduit to North Korea. That is the prime partner of North Korea. And that is probably one of the only places that can kind of inflict its will on that regime. Now, that said, they're terrified of North Korea collapsing because if they do, there'll be a crisis in their border region. And what they want most is some sense of stability, which obviously has been upset recently by North Korean provocations and Trump being threatening, belligerent. But I just want to read from a transcript of a phone call that was reported on in The Intercept with Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm, who is a frequent guest on the Ken and Ken show, which is a show from Massachusetts I listen to sometimes.
He's got a good right hook too.
Yeah, he punched Jesse Waters.
Yeah, we talked about that just the
That
other
is
day.
so
But we
awesome.
shouldn't mention it every time.
No, we
really.
should. That's one of his greatest accomplishments. So, one of the Donald Trump has made, and the Trump administration has said that one of the reasons that Trump is not going to criticize the Philippines president, Rodrigo Duterte, who has engaged in mass killings under the guise of a drug war, which is really about cleaning up his political opposition, and now is involved on the verge of declaring some type of state of emergency because of Islamic terrorism there. He's basically a walking wish fulfillment of everything that Trump wishes he was and could do. He's a guy who actually he's bragged about personally killing people in his previous job and is engaging in ruthless human rights abuses to shore up his political base. And a couple of weeks ago, when it was announced that Trump was inviting, I believe, Duterte to the White House, they asked people in the Trump administration, why would you guys kowtow to this guy so much? It's not like the Philippines, even if we're going to take a really cynical perspective on these human rights issues. The Philippines isn't China. It's not Saudi Arabia. It's not a place that maybe you have to ignore to some extent what they do in order to engage in, trade or, larger issues. The Philippines doesn't punch that much above its weight. President Obama certainly condemned Duterte in mild terms, and Duterte called Obama son of a whore, which is, I'm sure, another reason why Trump likes the guy so much. And they basically said, we can't mess with the Philippines right now because they're instrumental in dealing with the North Korea issue, which there is literally yes, they're in Asia. And maybe that's like Trump's zone. It's like what you do is you get all the Asians and you have a bowl of rice and you figure it out. And the Philippines needs to be there. So they released this transcript of Trump talking with Duterte about, or excuse me, it wasn't released, but it was obtained by The Intercept, of Trump talking with Duterte about North Korea's weapons program and the nuclear issue. And it was, it was as sophisticated as you'd expect. This is Trump. He said, we can't let a madman with nuclear weapons be let on the loose like that. We have a lot of firepower, more than he has, 20 times 20, but we don't want to use it. In fact, the U.S. has 6,800 nuclear warheads, and North Korea is thought to have about 10. So Trump is radically underestimating that. You'll be in good shape, he added. We have a lot of firepower, and then he's back to the firepower. We have a lot of firepower over there. We have 2 submarines, the best in the world. We have nuclear submarines.
McMaster, why are you giving me that look when I'm revealing this info?
Yeah, what's the problem? Oh, are you going to have to do another press conference where you say I didn't reveal anything wrong? Yeah, well, get used to it. By the way, is my daughter hot? Now, we don't want to use all of them. I've never seen anything like they are, but we don't have to use this. But it could be crazy, so we'll see what happens. The call taking place on April 29th, the transcript, an official Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs document, contains numerous typographical errors. Multiple government sources contacted by the Philippines outlet Rappler, which collaborated with the Intercept on the story, confirmed its authenticity. And then this is where Trump is rational. He goes, I hope China solves the problem. They really have the means because a great degree of their stuff is coming through China. But if China doesn't do it, we will do it. Then Duterte volunteers to call Chinese President Xi Jinping, and then adding, the other option is a nuclear blast, which is not good for everybody. I can really see how synchronized these guys are. And Joseph Cirincione, who's the president of the Plowshares Fund, he had this to say. He said, Trump has a disturbing tendency to talk very cavalierly about nuclear weapons, as if he is an impulse away from using them. He doesn't seem to understand the vast destructive nature of these weapons and the lines he would be crossed by using them. So there you have it. And I remember Tony Schwartz, who ghost wrote Art of the Deal, said during the campaign that he would expect Trump to potentially use a nuke. So Don't worry about ISIL as much.
And the
It's got
scary
much
thing
bigger things about that.
is if that happens, it's not because just Trump was able to convince the military to go along with it. It's because there are probably people in the military that have been itching to use these things that wish they would have used them in Vietnam, wished would have used them in other places, and now all of a sudden they get emboldened because you have Seb Gorka as Deputy Assistant National Security, and
You have a bunch of absolute morons who are willing to act out the id of bureaucratically effective morons. That's what you have. And it's a really dangerous situation. You are calling from a 727 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from St. Petersburg, Florida.
What's going on, Alex?
So I was listening to Michael Savage, the radio host. Are you
Great guy.
familiar?
Does a great
with him?
job.
Savage
Great guy.
Nation. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know the story behind Michael Savage?
A little bit. Just a year ago, I started hearing his craziness, and I had to just keep listening to see how bad it's going to get.
Yeah.
And he's kind of turning on Trump a little bit, it seems. But yeah, continue, please.
No, his real name is Michael Weiner. And
Yeah, Weiner.
yeah, I mean, I get it. Maybe if Anthony Weiner changed his name, it would have saved his career and his life. But he, before he was a right wing, I read a New Yorker article about him, and he used to be a botanist, and he hung out with Allen Ginsberg and promoted like alternative medicines and herbal therapies. And then somehow in the 80s in San Francisco, he decided he really hated gay people, and he changed his name and launched a new career for himself. So he's not invited.
Yeah.
He's not invited to Passover, but it's a very bizarre story. Yeah, but how is he turning against Trump? I haven't listened to him in ever. Actually, I just read that article.
Oh, he's just really bit. He wrote this book called Trump's War, and he's really bitter that he didn't get invited back to Mar-a-Lago. But the question or point I wanted to bring out is, yesterday on his show, he said that the reason Melania swatted Donald's hand on the tarmac in Israel is because Melania knew better than to offend the Orthodox Jews by letting Donald hold her hand.
Right.
And
yes, I am
wondering,
very,
is that
very
like the
sensitive
biggest
to
leap
the
ever?
Jew. I like the Jew. I don't want to defend the Jew. That is maybe the biggest leap ever. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I was just like, this is crazy.
There
and,
may be Orthodox
what a sad
Jew in the
guy.
Vatican too. That's why I've slapped your hand away there too. I'll always slap your hand away now, just in case.
There could be Jew in Riyadh.
Oh,
Don't
Jared's
be
here.
within 10 feet of me.
Isn't Jared Orthodox?
Yeah,
So
Jared's
she just
here.
always slap.
Yeah.
Jared's nearby. Sorry.
I hate Jared so much. I'm going to have double date night with Ivanka this week. Yeah, that's a stretch. That is a major stretch. Did you have anything else?
I'm a big fan. I mean, I have a bunch of other stuff we could talk about. What do you guys think about Saudi Arabia as opposed to Iran? Why is it that right now there's Trump? People are okay with $110 billion going to Saudi Arabia with the. Okay, here's a real question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Saudi Arabia is worse than Iran? Because I'm getting that feeling that it is, and I don't know why we're supporting.
I mean, I don't.
One, and is it?
I don't like to answer questions that way. Like, what's worse,
Yeah, okay.
what's better. But Saudi Arabia is worse. So
Yeah,
I mean,
it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean, look, Iran is not a place to in any way idealize, and they've but it's a much more complicated. I mean, look, basically what Saudi Arabia is an alliance between basically a group of warlords and fighters who turned into a royal family, and they made an alliance with Wahhabi religious fanatics, and they took over a country, and created modern Saudi Arabia, and that's the alliance. That's what drives the Sauds. It's money, oil, and fundamentalism. And obviously, if you meet any privileged Saudi outside of a Saudi context, or maybe even in one, I mean, these people they enjoy themselves, right? So it's chock full with hypocrisy and everything else. But the basic agreement at the heart of Saudi politics is the oil flows, the religious establishment gets to run social policy more or less, and then the royal family profits enormously and directs foreign policy and kind of, moves and operates. And in the 80s, I mean, we had struck an alliance with Saudi Arabia in World War II, but in the 80s, Saudi was one of the main conduits through which we pumped money to the Mujahideen and these other groups in Afghanistan fighting a proxy war in Afghanistan, right, against the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And what we thought at the time was that basically, when you had these Mujahideen fighters in the White House and Reagan said they were like our founding fathers, it actually made sense from an American conservative perspective, because basically you had religious conservatives who hated communism. Now, the Iranian Revolution is more complicated because they were a fusion of a Shia religious extremism, and they engaged in mass killings and purges, and absolutely, but they also were very opposed. Their constitution says neither east nor west. So it was the first thing, if you think about it, in 1979, to have a government that comes out and says, we don't want to be a client of either the United States or the Soviet Union, and we want to create a democratic system which is based on our own traditions. That's a really different proposition. So Iran's approach to foreign policy and Iran's, at least the way it projects itself into the world, has always been not just Islamic, but also anti-imperial, anti-colonial, and that's a big problem for the United States, right? Now we're on the same side with Iran with regards to groups like ISIL, and it's all really relative. None of these governments have good human rights records or anything like that, but comparably speaking, I mean, you just saw, we played a clip of a bunch of Tehranis celebrating in the streets the re-election of a moderate president in an open election. Saudi Arabia likes to, get New York Times columnists to come hang out and brag that they're, going to have some type of irrelevant, municipal sort of advisory elections. So, yeah, I mean, and not to mention to which Saudi absolutely has funded Sunni fundamentalism, not just terrorist groups, but across the globe. Like, that's why you go to a place like Indonesia, which has a very moderate, open form of Islam historically, and then you get these fanatical mosques and everything else. That's Saudi money. Pakistan, the madrasa culture that helped lead to the rise of the Taliban, that's Saudi money. So they really are the primary kind of funding and intellectual architecture of, that kind of extremism. Now, on the other hand, they throw money everywhere. That's like a goodwill gesture. They'll set up there's, I think at University of Arkansas, there's a Bill Clinton Institute on Middle East. Saudis, create that. They kick money everywhere, and they want to be in good with everybody. And they can, because they have an endless supply of resources. But they are a problem. And the other big thing, just to end on this, is that starting with Obama and accelerating under Trump, the Saudis were so pissed about the Iran deal that we let them go and basically do whatever the fuck they want in Yemen. And the devastation of what has happened in that country over the last couple of years, the rate of civilian casualties is monumental. There's a water crisis there, and we have essentially just given that to Saudi Arabia to try to placate them somewhat because they're angry about the Iran deal. Anyways, I appreciate the call. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for taking it.
Absolutely. Let's do a little bit more sound. What is this?
The Pope presented Trump with some Martin Luther King books.
Okay. Martin Luther King, great guy. Wouldn't have let him move into one of my buildings, but great guy. This is Trump meeting with the Pope. And obviously the Pope here is trying to send him a subtle spiritual signal about not being a complete buffoonish robber baron predator scumbag. And Trump is going to basically, is he going to pull a Frederick Douglass here? Is that what's about to happen? I haven't seen this clip yet. Let's see what happens. Let's check it out.
And then, in exchange of gifts, the president presenting the Pope with a bronze sculpture representing a peaceful tomorrow, a piece of granite from the Martin Luther King Memorial Monument, and a first edition set of writings from the civil rights leader.
These are books, son libros, Martin Luther King,
Oh.
Thank you.
The Pope's gifts, a medallion with an olive symbolizing peace.
We can use peace.
And 3 of his encyclicals, one including his views on climate change. That gift a subtle nudge as President Trump weighs whether to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The environment, one of several issues where the men have disagreed openly.
Oh, climate change is going to be the least of your worries, old man, when I'm done with my agenda.
I want a full accounting of how the Trump administration decided to present the Pope with writings of Martin Luther King.
I know exactly.
Were they clearing out
Ben
space?
Carson was the last person that Trump saw before he left the White House. He was just like, oh, black guys.
I think it's more like,
let's give him an MLK gift.
What's that big box on the shelf there? I mean, I need to move out and put some more of Steve's books on there. So let's get that. Oh, it's MLK. Oh, let's give it to the Pope.
Perfect. Let's give it to the Pope.
Perfect for the Pope.
He's totally into that stuff. Like, oh, let's care about poor people. Let's be nice or whatever. He'll be bigly into that. All right, let's keep going with sound. Let's in fact go back to Saudi. I know that you guys played a version of this the other day, but this is amazing. And of course, you know, I would imagine Trump is very at home in Saudi Arabia. We already talked about this. From his perspective, great decorations. The other thing is that the version of Wahhabism that the Saudis practice, they don't believe in historical preservation of many things that could be considered in any way sort of un-Islamic. Or pre-prophet or anything else.
Or boring.
So they have this weird thing where it's like this tremendous religious conservatism, but everything looks like 1980s Beverly Hills, and someone dropped some acid that didn't make you visionary. It just made you really tacky. So Trump should love it there. And here he is, hanging out with this guy. And by the way, I will say, to be fair to Trump, this would be a cool reason to be president, to just get like an official Saudi greeting. They come out in a motorcade of cars. They have white horses. And then you get to go do this sword war dance, which is fucking awesome. And I have to say, I think any of us would do this with a lot more physical coordination. And I'm even including Sam in this. This is really painful to look at. This is Trump doing a sword dance in Saudi Arabia for war, and just behold this.
Floppy sword.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Heavy. This is the war dance. I can see that in the back.
Tillerson and Wilbur Ross.
At least their swords are upright. I'll give them that.
Rex, you're supposed to flop it down at the side.
Yeah, Rex, you're supposed to be loose-wristed. That's how it works. I think these Saudis are like, you know, we get judged for calling you people barbarians, but look at yourselves in your penguin suits. You can't even hold a frickin' sword.
Tillerson's finally thinking it was all worth it.
Yeah, Tillerson looks happy for the first time I've ever seen him.
Tillerson and Wilbur Ross are doing an okay job, and Wilbur Ross is almost literally the crypt keeper. Like, he is just a million years old.
Wilbur Ross thinks he's like entering some sort of afterlife right now, I think.
Wilbur Ross is like, and then I closed my eyes, and then some Arabs were holding swords, but they welcomed me. And I think I did right defrauding the futures market.
It's very strange to see Melania standing there in the middle of all of this with no, there's no head covering, and
they don't mandate that for foreign visitors.
Well, clearly, otherwise they would have just cut her head off or something.
That would have been interesting.
Right.
Gotta play by the rules, Melania.
I could see Trump getting along with that. You know what? I was looking for a third divorce anyways. It seems a lot more efficient. You guys want to behead Melania? And then we could go get some steak with ketchup?
And it just must be so bizarre for all of the people that were there.
My friend, you want us behead your wife? You'll behead my wife, really? Can we get that done before dinner time? You know, the press lies about me so much. Yes, lie about us too. We behead your wife. Come on, you want us behead son-in-law too? He is Jew.
We're gonna need a more rigid sword for that, though.
Yeah, she's a very thick neck. Not good. The sword dance. It's like the studio. It's like the club days. You're calling from a 417 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Michael. This is James from Springfield, Missouri. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Saudi thing and talk a little bit about the kind of some of the meta issues and get your thoughts on it. I mean, the Saudis clearly rolled the Republicans and these business people.
Yes.
And I think this points to something about like the cult of business people. Businessmen and CEOs are autocrats. They live in an autocratic world. They issue commands just like an emperor would issue decrees over their business. Thus, they have a lot of sort of subconscious culture in common with the Saudis. And the Saudis know how to play them. They're impressed by all this dressing up, dancing around, and they've been completely rolled. The only person who looked like he realized what was going on was Steve Bannon. You know, he's standing in the middle realizing he's getting culturally cucked right in front of the world's camera. So, this is really...
Steve Bannon's like sneaking alcohol into Saudi Arabia. It's like his personal victory for his own like alcoholism and beating the Saudis.
Did you ever see the episode of Yes Minister, the British comedy, where they have a communications tent where they're sneaking alcohol into Saudi Arabia, claiming that it's telephone calls from different people.
That's hilarious.
But this is really. This cult of the business person, which, is so massive in the United States, which really shocks me when I came to America, was, people think these people are like magical. It's almost as if they look on them in the same way as a peasant back in the 16th century might have looked upon his feudal lord, as if these people are somehow magical and have this great wisdom. But the Saudis have shown in front of the entire world that they can roll them.
I think that's totally true, and I think that I don't even know if it's a role. I mean, I think that they're partners, and they have been for a long time. And they're religious. They're obsessed with capitalism. And the
Saudis have this institutional memory. They know they admit that they're a royal family. They don't have this pretense that they've actually done this all by themselves. Right. So, this allows them to be perhaps a little bit more self-conscious in what they're doing, a little bit more aware of how they're playing them, because I think these guys are total chumps when they went over there. I mean, that was the main point I wanted to make today. And also, I just want to give a shout-out to all my people in Britain who are, like, having a pretty hard time today. There's police on the street, apparently, army on the street. It's pretty sad what happened in Manchester, and I just want to give a shout-out to my people.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate the call, man. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.
I like the idea that Bannon was the only one who knew that he was being culturally cucked. It's like, you want to come do the sword dance with us? Nah, fuck that. I'll do the sword dance.
Bannon came straight home after the Saudi Arabia trip.
Gotta get home. It's like my fucking ex-wife. She would do the sword dance.
Well, I think Bannon just wanted
drink.
He's like, I need to get back home and just go on a bender after this.
Yeah, he's like, I would like to spend some of the time before I go to jail drinking.
There's no way that...
Versus in Saudi Arabia.
From the way that it seems that he is a drunk, that he could go for a couple of days without drinking.
Yeah, I think they look the other way. They seem to have a pretty good relationship with the security detail.
I'm sure they would take care of him in Saudi if he needed to. They're like, you are a white supremacist, man. You want alcohol? They take care of all of them.
Let's get Trump's people's like
you
they
want
wouldn't
to kill
want
your
to get
wife?
them drunk.
You want a beer? Whatever.
Let's get the strategist drunk.
Yeah, get the strategist drunk, behead the president's wife. Let's call it a day. Do you remember do we still have the footage? The most amazing thing was when Obama first met, and it was King Abdullah, who died a couple years ago. He presented, and you could find this picture, I'm sure, easily, but there's also video. They gave Obama the most blinged out. It was like an MC Hammer necklace. It was one of them. We got to find it. If you just look up, I don't know if it was the same level of bling. We can compare the Trump and Obama bling. I like this. Let's compare the Trump and Obama bling, and then we'll do some more sound.
Trump did a curtsy after he got his.
Oh, thank you. Let me do a curtsy.
Yeah.
I love you guys. You guys are great. Will you really kill my wife? If you put in like King Abdullah.
I found Obama.
Yeah, just find Obama. It's just the Obama thing is visually funny enough, and then we'll get some more sounds. I can't. This is what they gave him on his first visit. It was great. And then if you go to the other one, you could see the king. You could see the king presenting on the lower right. You can see Obama bowing to him while he drapes it over his neck. Anyways, this is just all the more reason to become president and go to Saudi Arabia. It actually looks kind of fun from that perspective. Sean Hannity has been running, and I got to admit, I don't know anything about this Seth Rich conspiracy story. I know very little. I know that
that's fine. WikiLeaks
and the Russian Twitter account in the UK have intimated that there's something there. I know that a private investigator who's a Fox News commentator who has warned us about the deep dangers of lesbian biker gangs, which I know that some of the people that are visiting us here today are also very concerned about, has talked on this issue, the danger of lesbian biker gangs. He's somebody who has continued to imply that this guy Seth Rich was actually the source inside the DNC for the WikiLeaks documents of the Hillary Clinton campaign emails, which revealed, shocking things like the Clinton campaign had a strategy to win the election. And also, not so shocking but depressing things like all of those people are pretty much uniformly fucking mediocrities and they had no idea what they were doing. And they certainly were the only people who could somehow put together a loss to a orange-faced sexual harasser, trust fund baby talk show host. But that said, there's very little evidence that this guy, Seth Rich, was murdered by Clinton operatives. And the family has actually asked this guy, Rod Wheeler, the private investigator who follows those lesbian biker gangs, to stop commenting on this issue. But even as some other members of the right-wing media have kind of backed down on this, Sean Hannity has kept plugging away on this story. And here he is on his radio program, even though on his TV show he had said he was ready to stop talking about the Seth Rich issue for now. He said on his radio program that he's not retracting anything and that he is not Fox News, because Fox News, of course, even Fox News retracted their reporting on this absolutely outlandish story. Here is Sean Hannity.
Just to close the circle here. The family's actually on the internet saying they want to find the truth. I feel so badly for this family and what they have been through and what they are going through. And my thoughts and prayers are with them. This issue is so big now that the entire Russia collusion narrative is hanging by a thread. If, in fact, take Seth out of it, there was a whistleblower within the DNC, a truth teller, that actually was the source for WikiLeaks and not Russia working with the Trump campaign. These are questions that I have a moral obligation to ask. And I will do the mainstream media's job like I have most of my career. Like we got it right on Obama, his radicalism, his record, on Trump having a chance to win, on Michael Brown, on Trayvon Martin, on Cambridge Police, on Baltimore. We're right, they're wrong. Like I was right in Atlanta in the Jewell case when everybody else said, oh, he fits the profile of a lone bomber, Richard Jewell. I was right then, too.
I like this.
And all you in the liberal media, I am not Fox.com or FoxNews.com. I retracted nothing.
Yeah. I can see why he likes to have himself bedded like that while he's talking nonsense. What's interesting is that he's ranting there, but there's one theme that emerges. He's not retracting anything. He reserves the right to go back to the conspiracy theory. And all of the issues he's been right about are like racist conspiracy theories. I dig that. He's like, I was right when I said that black kid should be killed. And I was right when the cops murdered that other black kid. And I was right about the things that I spread about President Obama. Can somebody please, I know you're taking a lot of time today, potentially, if you're an active Twitter user, to bother John Podhoretz, and that's fine. But if somebody could please DM Sean Hannity or just message him. He's a very, very, very robustly stupid guy. A sound clip of a Nation of Islam Obama appearance on this show and say, Sean, how did you miss this? Let's blow the lid off of the true Obama story. Just send that to him. And please, can we see what happens? Because I have very little doubt that Sean will run with it. Just like when he thought the Russian foreign minister was personally DMing him on Twitter to warn him that he was being monitored. Sean Hannity. He is someone who is so toxic and so terrible, but he really might have the stupidity excuse, just like Donald Trump really might have the syphilis excuse. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I published an article in Salon beating up Bill Maher for a lot of just mind-blowingly, he's bad on the Middle East. He's bad on Islam. And it's also sometimes with Bill Maher comedically, it's kind of like the Turk said in The Godfather. You know, the Don is losing it. Sometimes he's a little flat when he hosts his show. But a couple weeks ago, he had a great Ivanka Donald incest joke. I recommend everybody look it up. And as I say, I will always stand in solidarity with anyone who makes those jokes. No permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And those interests include any incest material in the Trump family. So here is Sean Hannity, who's definitely having a hard time. And he tweeted this out just today, in fact, May 24th. And this was a joke that was about 3 weeks ago. Interesting. Real Time can make so-called jokes about Ivanka, and Colbert can make vile comments about POTUS and that's Melania. She's at MMFA. Yeah, I don't know. Silent. And then I got to read this out. I am the last person to criticize people on their spelling mistakes, but I also don't have an entire staff that is available at my beck and call 24 hours a day to make sure I don't look like a moron, particularly when I'm going hard on Twitter. Hashtag HIPORCRACY. And I think Jimmy Reefer Cake would know that he really miscalculated there. That is not how you spell hypocrisy. Not good times for Sean Hannity.
I have two comments. First of all, he's saying that it's interesting that Bill Maher can make the incest jokes, but it doesn't show up on at MMFA at Media Matters for America.
Oh, Media Matters for America.
So he's saying
right.
that it's
sure.
Hypocritical. And then I kind of wonder if I know this is very me thing to say, but because it's okay.
Kelly's contrarian.
Well, no,
go
because that is a play on democracy. If you're going to spell hypocrisy,
well, I made the joke that it's government via hypocrisy. I don't think he's being.
If
he's joking with
think
hashtag
that Sean Hannity is that smart,
no, I don't think he's that smart.
Yeah.
I'm saying is it a thing that he maybe has seen, or I mean, I don't follow.
He misspelled it because it was a hashtag, and then the spell check didn't save him because he had the hashtag in front of it.
That's what I think.
Okay.
But I always short stock Sean Hannity,
and it's also a bit different making jokes versus using a grieving family's investigation into their murdered son as political cover for, as if Seth Rich, if he did leak it to WikiLeaks, that would change all the entanglements that Kushner has and the line about the meetings. it's not hanging by a thread, folks.
And let's just be clear here, just to get to this for a second, because it's ridiculous to even have to talk about this because it's such an unbelievably baseless and stupid story, and anybody that's covering it is being, exploitative and irresponsible and stupid and everything else. Again, this guy Rod Wheeler, who is supposedly the private investigator source, who has no credibility for this, when he was contacted by CNN, he basically said that he himself learned about the possibility of this story from a FoxNews.com story. So the dude that is the source for all these people is relying on an outlet that he supposedly is a source for. It's ludicrous. And
he's not just a source, he's a paid contributor.
No, but I'm saying he's supposedly the person who has inside information on this story. And he himself admitted to CNN that what he's learning about it was through talking to a reporter from FoxNews.com himself. It's insane. To be talking about this, even if you're Sean Hannity, should be embarrassing. Even if you're Sean Hannity. And nothing should embarrass Sean Hannity.
I mean, is Hannity trying to maybe get out of his contract or something?
No, he's trying to curry favor with the regime.
I mean, he had Assange
Jury
on.
doesn't want out of his contract?
I mean, Assange...
I'm not sure of anything.
I mean, Assange...
Other than that, he's a moron.
Assange, a lot of this is because Assange obliquely insinuated that Seth Rich could possibly be the leaker. But, I mean, that could have just been Assange playing media games, as if he doesn't do that. That's kind of what his... I mean, he has plenty of time to think of stuff like that.
That's true.
And so until there's evidence, it's ridiculous.
Okay, just take this for about 20 seconds. If you could clip this and send this to Sean Hannity. Sharia Phase 3 begins after we kill the healthcare markup. Allahu Akbar. Tell them that that's a real clip of President Obama addressing a food and innovation summit in Italy. And let's just see if he tweets it out.
I like the spy one where you...
Yeah. Oh, the spy one's already out there. You could just send the spy one to him and confirm the spy story. That was explosive. You're calling from a 330 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
This is Richard, and I'm calling from Ohio.
Hey, what's up, man? What's going on?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say I personally think that Sean Hannity is given a shout-out to the disposable heroes of hypocrisy, a little-known hip-hop band from the 90s. But that's just my thought.
Okay.
But actually, I was calling mostly to talk to you about the Trump budget, and you and Sam kind of blasted it yesterday, and you blasted it today, but I think you guys are looking at it in the wrong way.
You usually think we're looking at stuff in the wrong way. Yes.
Well, everybody's got to suffer criticism, dude. I mean, I'm married.
So
I live with it. But
I hope so.
Here's what I'm thinking.
I hope, Mrs. Richard, I hope you
I'm
criticize the hell out of this guy, including on his phone calls.
Thank you very much.
You're
if
welcome.
you like, the next time I call you, I'll put her on and she'll yell at you. But here's the thing.
That'll be interesting.
Trump budget. We're talking about massive increases in military spending, massive increases in military equipment purchases, massive increases in giving money to police departments.
Mm-hmm.
What does that translate to? I'll tell you.
Jobs. Yep.
We're talking. They're going to hire more soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to hire more guys to build obscenely expensive jets.
Yep.
When the police state comes, they're going to have to hire millions of extra cops. I mean, the Stasi employed like half of East Germany, right? So what does that mean? It means jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are just looking at it in the wrong way. I mean, you sacrifice a few personal freedoms, but everybody gets a job.
Well, this budget is
about
definitely not going to pass, but there's no doubt that, yes, there would be more employment in military and policing, no question. And it will make sense when you completely decimate the social safety net that you want more people monitoring the streets. So, yeah, I think you're actually reading the budget right. I appreciate the call, man. Thanks. Okay, you are calling from a 352 area code. I'm trying to get through all of these because I feel like we always leave people hanging. You're calling from a 352 area code.
Hi.
Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Simon. I'm calling Atlanta.
Sorry, can you say your name again?
Simon.
Okay.
It's A-M-A-N.
Yeah, got it. What's on your
M-A-N.
What's on your mind?
So I'm from Iran, and I actually tweeted you yesterday about the
You asked what do you want to cover. I asked you about election.
Uh-huh.
I want to thank you for that you covered it. But I wanted to tell you like a couple of comments first about the Iranian election. It's just the way that I think people should look at it is we had a revolution to change from monarchy to system like in the UK more than 100 years ago. That was stolen by.
Hello?
And then we had Mossadegh. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I was saying that the first revolution, I mean, that was overthrown by the America at the time and the support of Russians. And then we had Mossadegh later, 50 years later, and that was toppled by the help of Americans. And then we had the Iranian revolution, the Islamic revolution, which was hijacked by the religious fanatics.
Yeah.
So in terms of the experience the Iranian population has, it's a very experienced voter population, and they don't go with the popular candidates. And that's what happened in this election. So in terms of maturity, I got to tell you, we have a really mature, educated, informed populace in Iran, and it's just a comment that I wanted to share with you.
But they went from Ahmadinejad. I mean, at least the first time. 2009 is disputed, but he definitely won his first election.
Exactly, you're right. And that's the populist part experience that I said. Like this time, the guy that was running against Rouhani, he wanted to use Ahmadinejad's playbook, but he lost. He told people that he's going to increase their the money that they give to people, something like not a basic income, but food stamps, something like that. But maybe it's not just for foods and things. And he said that it tripled that, and people, even in the poorest areas, said, no, screw you, we're going to go to for Rouhani. And the other thing that I wanted to say about what happened in Manchester, and which is a monstrous act, but I noticed that it has not been mentioned by you or mainstream outlets, and that's the connection between that attack and what happened in Libya, because the guy was from Libya. And don't you think there's a connection there, that he sees the destruction of his country? And I got to tell you that Libya had a really modern infrastructure. They had free healthcare. They were one of the highest educated nations in North Africa. And that country got totally destroyed. So
yeah, I wouldn't idealize Gaddafi at all, but I think that obviously there's always a lot of variables in what leads to this, and I don't think you can but I think of course that's a factor. Anyway, I appreciate the call, man.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. I just wanted to say that's a factor.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course, thanks so much. All right, let's keep moving through the IMs. Dolink, I'm glad the Iranian election results, but as for human rights, members of the Baha'i faith continue to have their homes broken into, to be arrested and executed when they refuse to recant their faith and become Muslim. Absolutely. I co-wrote an article a couple years ago for the Washington Post with Reza Aslan about this, and yeah, it's terrible. Their crimes include gathering for prayers, classes, and fellowship. They're peaceful people. They're non-political. Their accusations that there are spies for Israel simply because their world center is in Haifa. Another reason that is a lot of Baha'i wealth has been stolen by the regime. And so there's a sort of really skewed incentive structure with those human rights abuses. Leon Gittins, hi, Michael. Great show as always. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up with regard to the general election race over here in the UK. As expected, all campaigning has been put on hold with the exception of UKIP, who are doing so badly they need everything to try and gain any votes, and they are resuming their campaign tomorrow. The other main parties are expected to resume their campaigns after the bank holiday weekend, which means they will lose a week of campaigning, which will harm Labour's chances of winning this race. Speaking of Labour, they have eaten away at what was a 25-point lead the Tories had when this snap election was first called. The latest polls put them in a single figures behind Conservatives and catching up fast. The launch of the Tory manifesto was a disaster, and they're making major U-turns on what critics call the dementia tax. It's being compared to Thatcher's poll tax that eventually brought Maggie Thatcher down. In contrast, Labor's manifesto has been very popular, and people seem to be moving past the fact that Corbyn was seen as a weak leader, will be voting for Labor on their policies and not based on their leader. Let's hope that this horrible attack does not derail what was an astonishing comeback for Corbyn in the Labour Party. Leon of London, absolutely. I agree. I would do everything you can if you're in the UK to cut that margin. Barchem, no joke. Have you ever had grass-fed organic ribeye steak with some nice homemade spicy ketchup? Actually quite tasty. I haven't. Epish, Manchester arena bombings seem remarkably similar to the 126 who were killed in the April bombings in Aleppo. Evacuees, mostly kids, were trying to get food in new direction. They kept these kids on a bus for 24 hours without food, and then the kids went out for bags of chips, and the bomber drove into the town, into the crowd. Same idea as the kid exiting in the atrium. Shameful. Now on the super producer quit list, coworkers say that super producer went to IDM Bubble Rave in Miami for the weekend. I was trying to defend you, man. I knew you weren't at a rave. I thought you. I told. Well, how do you call it, Matt? You said I was at a hip hop festival.
It's a rap festival.
I was at a rap festival.
Rolling Loud.
Rolling Loud. Rap festival.
I say it like Bernie too. Rolling Loud.
I was at Rolling Loud. I was at the rap festival. I wasn't at a fucking rave. It's hippie bullshit. Let's do one more piece of sound, and then we'll run through some IMs and wrap this up. So the House Intel Committee is threatening to subpoena Mike Flynn for his documents and testimony. And Mike Flynn is talking about pleading the Fifth. And the Senate Intelligence Committee made a similar announcement on Tuesday as well. Mike Warner said that the committee wanted to subpoena some of his business records and other documents. And he also dryly observed, a business does not have a right to take the Fifth. You would, as I say, it's kind of surprising to me.
I can't believe that's true in America.
Republicans haven't taken care of that. Like, yeah, did we throw some workers into a grinding machine?
What have we been doing for the last 40 years?
I think it's totally unfair. Corporations are people too. And so this all, is a sort of continued fallout of this Russia story. And yesterday, John Brennan was testifying that he did think, in his capacity as head of the CIA, that there was sufficient enough intelligence to move forward with the Russia probe, particularly and specifically dealing with Donald Trump. Now, Trey Gowdy, who is the simian-like guy in the House Intelligence Committee and the main Benghazi hustler, he has jumped on this, and it's a very, tactical, manipulative thing, but he's focused on this distinction between evidence and intelligence. And evidence is a hard, fast, thing. This is like court of law stuff. It's a different process. Intelligence is, what the term means. You're going out, you're tracking information, you're finding patterns, you're putting things together. And that's what Brennan said. He said there was sufficient enough intelligence, some evidence to warrant the Russia probe. But he was emphasizing intelligence versus evidence. And this is former CIA agent Trey Gowdy, Philip Mudd. I'm sorry, I got confused. This is former CIA agent Philip Mudd, who's on CNN. And he's basically saying that Trey Gowdy should, just check it out. He doesn't like that he's obfuscating the meaning of evidence with regards to intelligence collection. So this is the former CIA operative Philip Mudd on CNN.
Right. But it ends up just being frustrating to people listening because it devolves into this debate over semantics, intel versus evidence. And in fact, it got a little heated with Congressman Trey Gowdy. So let me just play this for you and then you can respond. Watch this.
Did you have evidence of a connection between the Trump campaign,
Jesus, look at that guy,
Russian state actors?
As I said, Mr. Gowdy, I don't do evidence.
I appreciate that you don't do evidence, Director Brennan. You and I both know what the word evidence means. It's a really simple question. Did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts?
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign.
See, Phil, that's what's so frustrating. Did collusion exist? That's the burning question that everybody wants answered. And then Brennan says, well, I know of contacts and communication.
Well, Trey Gowdy ought to have his ass kicked. He knows the difference between intelligence and evidence. Let me tell you something, Allison. If you're an American citizen and the National Security Agency collects intelligence, that is, intercepts of Russians who report what you've said, do you think it's fair to go to a court and say that's evidence that you did something wrong? That's why the FBI is going to take a year or more to investigate this, because the American citizens involved in this have a right to have evidence presented in a court beyond a conversation that a Russian official reports. In my world, this distinction is black and white. It's a hard line. I know it's frustrating for the American people, but I hope they don't want evidence to be perceived as something that a Russian official says, and that's it. You can be convicted on that.
So that's a very important point. He's saying, look, the intelligence is there to pursue this as a line of inquiry. But when you start demanding evidence, that's Donald Trump is on trial. Jared Kushner is on trial. They're getting convicted and going to jail on behalf of things on the weight of evidence that is not intercepted calls. It isn't pattern recognition or anything else that people do in the intelligence services. And very few people, other than I think maybe that crazy woman on Twitter, what's her name, Louise Mensch, uses the word evidence. There is a lot of intelligence. And Trey Gowdy knows exactly what he's doing. And he's one of the more kind of cynical, disgusting figures in the game.
Trey Gowdy's job is to find a line through all of this where the sky isn't falling. So he said, like, it's normal for campaigns to talk to Russia and all these sorts of things that he can later revise when more information comes out. And with regards to that intelligence evidence split, at least statutorily, the CIA is supposed to be foreign and the FBI domestic. So that's the point, right? Like, the CIA is out collecting intelligence, and then they refer that to the FBI, who then investigates, which turns that intelligence into evidence.
Right, exactly. I mean,
and they know that, but now this is why you hear all the Trumpkins on social media say, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. Even Doug, when he called us, what's the evidence? Well, it's like, we're not investigating the thing right now.
We're talking about the intelligence. And of course, I'm sure Trey Gowdy has been involved in every type of legislative push to blur that distinction and allow the CIA to interfere more in domestic investigations and sort of blur what that line means. But just be aware, this is the Republican game right now. After Comey's been fired and everything else, people keep waiting for Republicans to turn on Trump. They're not going to until it's completely untenable, or maybe they get mad at him because this whole mess has delayed the markup on the health care bill and throwing people off of the insurance rolls. They don't care about this story. They don't care about using the White House for personal enrichment. They don't care about the racism. They don't care about the sexism. They care about destroying the social safety net and giving money to people who already have endless amounts of it. All right, let's run through some IMs and then we'll wrap up. Contagious Chameleon. Hey, Michael, just a thought, but when Alex Jones says that the government is doing gun violence in order to ban guns, isn't he in a way making the case in favor of taking in refugees and ignoring the extremist attacks? Way too sophisticated for Alex Jones right there, man, but I hear you. Cuddle Monkey and the D-Man. Michael, did you catch photos of the Trumps visiting the Vatican? The Pope looks like God's existence was just definitely disproven to him. He does. The Pope looks like he's just like, I'm agnostic. I think that there's a spiritual aspect of life, but obviously God is not intervening if these people are here in the same room as me. He looks that depressed. CNN actually ran the photo in the headline of the meeting. It's like the shadiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Death camp for kulaks. Michael, there seems to be a little bit of an ongoing conversation about capitalism on the show. And as Sam continues trying to navigate the discussion with various callers and IMers, he's really showing his blind spot, especially when he dusts off with statements like the definitions of socialism are blurry. He said that? I don't know if
well, it's a spectrum that there's over the course of history, there's been different sort of iterations of what socialism means.
It's a spectrum. Hello? The issue with capitalism, wealth inequality, perpetual war, corruption, etc. aren't exactly bugs that need fixing. They're features of the capitalist system. At its core, capitalism is rooted in human exploitation, and that's a primary distinction. Secret identity politics, DNC staffer 1. Hey, do you remember that conversation we had over email where we were spitballing, warning some weird ads in the South about Bernie Sanders being a communist and a secular Jew? DNC staffer 2. We said we're never going to speak of that again. DNC staffer 1. Well, that conversation has been leaked, I suspect, by Zach. What's the policy regarding termination? Oh, Seth has to die. Get me common ping pong on the line. As soon as he put it out, my wife knew that Seth had to go.
You thought the committee to re-elect the president was bad for Nixon, but this DNC under Wasserman Schultz, they'll kill people.
They kill it, they do it for fun. My wife does it just to watch people's spirit leave their bodies. Also, it's weird that Ivanka and Melania were treated as edgy for going to Saudi Arabia with head carves uncovered, and yet when they meet the Pope, they look like they're attending a funeral from a movie. Kiki the Cuck. I feel you owe Mindy an on-air apology. You were very rude to her when she called in a couple weeks ago. Really? Yeah. And you hung up on her? Oh, you know what? Ironically, that's because you guys were yapping on me off air. I was talking with Mindy, and you guys were both like, 240. It's 240. It's 240. It's very, when you guys do your little running commentaries off mic, it can make me speed things up. But Mindy, though. I apologize, and I look forward to your future call. Dragon Slayer. Same day that Anderson Cooper says poop on TV, Samantha gets Chris Hayes to say pee-pee on TV. Coincidence? I think not. I don't know about any part of that. Matt, I have cited DARPA. Oh, this is Umar Shami. Matt, you better get on the ball with UFO shit.
Is this about UFOs or the government and the
economy?
I have
cited No, this is more intelligent than government and the economy. Matt, I have cited DARPA, GPS, and the Apollo program when arguing for the... Oh, no, this is about... when arguing for the importance of big government speeding up the rapid progress of technology. But it is necessary, not sufficient. Are you arguing that, say, the predictions of Moore's Law, i.e. the double computational power for every 18 months that has been verified over the last 41 years would only have occurred with only government spending and no capitalist pressure without requiring fundamental changes in human behavior, the likes of which we routinely mock libertarians for?
No, I think what I said is Fairchild Semiconductor selling a lot of semiconductors to the government in World War II was a good thing to boost that industry.
That was...
I mean, I
for those of you that don't know Matt, that's Matt's version of a shoulder brush right there.
I mean, no,
he just brushed his shoulder off at you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we're talking about with like mixed economies versus socialism versus communism versus capitalism. I just think, I don't know, people on one side assume a definition means one thing, and then the conservatives think it means something else. It's
I agree. All right, and also, have you seen the screenshots for Red Dead Redemption 2?
I can't wait for that game.
Okay, Communist Dog, America. You're going to get so tired of losing, you're going to regret your vote. Sam's de minimis penis. Michael, are you skeptical of how often in this latest case the authorities seem to almost immediately know who the perpetrator is, and they were known to the authorities? I'm suggesting maybe they've encouraged these people, if not outright put them up to this for larger global strategic reasons. You are suggesting that? I don't agree with that, but I definitely think that there have been a lot of people involved in terrorist attacks that have been familiar to intelligence services, and we've seen, I mean...
could have been nudged on by undercover people.
There was the New York Times reporters who wrote a book a couple of years ago about essentially, and I forget the author's name, but like developmentally delayed teenagers that would get entrapped into like some ludicrous terrorist plots by the FBI. So that's like on the opposite end. Those are things that never happened. They were never going to happen. You were just basically taking advantage of dumb kids to get to get an arrest for yourself. I don't think I'm at a point where I believe in this false flag thing. I do like your IM name though. PPS, does anybody know about Operation Gladio? Maybe a show on it would be good.
I believe Gladio is sort of it's a Nazi Vatican related stay behind unit. That's kind of I'm not totally up on top of it, to be honest. And I've read one source, and it sort of devolved into a Gulen conspiracy thing. And so yeah, I wouldn't. I'm kind of dubious of it, to be honest. But I know there was some. It sort of stayed behind.
Not up on it or part of the conspiracy. You decide.
I mean, I think there might be some interesting stuff there, but I think the specific reference I read was nonsense.
Luis from Texas, I'm a full-fledged paying member as well as a 4th-tier Patreon supporter. I also support Ring of Fire, and I love Two Dope Boys in a Podcast. Keep up the good work. All you guys do, all the work you do is amazing. Thank you so much. There's a shofar. Great interview. Shouldn't we call the terrorist group ISIL instead of ISIS? Yes. Yes, it's that is not their preferred name. I agree with that. Should we even... Okay. I'm not going to do pick a letter. I'll just run through the last couple, and then we'll wrap this up. Neff, I don't know if you discussed this, but the targets of the attack in Manchester were, we did, Ariana Grande's fan base, young girls and their moms who took them to the concert they were picking up right after the show. An attack on women specifically that itself is seriously important as well as disturbing. Yes, specifically women, but also really specifically young girls, young children. Vermilion Sky. Hello, all of you. Question for Michael. As far as winning back red state seats go, we obviously need to register and mobilize minority voters along the lines of the food service unions in Nevada. I think the idea of moving towards the center in red states is usually dumb. But what issues should we compromise on? Pelosi hinted at abortion, which is a huge mistake, but how about guns? 90% of people support reforming thing is useless when it's not motivating a single issue for them. I know this will bother Cliff, but I think we have to concede on guns for the foreseeable future. I'm not going to get into specifics, but guns are definitely an issue that I would be very willing to...
depending on locality.
Depending on where you live, I would have way more flex about guns than abortion.
I think you can't frame it as I think the frame that we want to do away with the right to do guns and establish that is not protected by the Constitution. I don't think that's going to be helpful in winning elections in Montana. I think that's the sort of thing that needs to be dropped. But as far as like background checks and stuff, I think you have to keep up the pressure on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I generally buy that.
That's not the way that those people see things, though, because as much as universal background checks, as much as it makes sense and wouldn't affect people that are just hunting and the things that they want to do like that, a federal law restricting access to guns they see as like, and it's not just them seeing it, they see it as a slippery slope, and the NRA has so much access to these people. So as soon as something happens, they send out, they fearmonger that it is a slippery slope, and I
still think you have to fight that.
I also don't. I think that for the people that are totally in that zone, they're not going to vote for a Democrat regardless. What you're doing with some of those issues is you're just showing like, hey, I kind of get where you're coming from, and for people that can be persuadable, they're persuadable. That's what Bernie's gun record in Vermont is.
I have uncles in the NRA and stuff, and I would talk about things like background checks, and
they would support it, right?
Like
normal NRA members might be more persuadable.
You'll be able to shave off a number, not all of them, obviously,
but that's all you need.
Yeah, of course, but it isn't all you need because, well, it's the end of the show, so.
Oh, okay. Ivanka Tinkle. The grotesque and obscene Milo Yiannopoulos actually finds a way to be even more dense by actually laying the blame of the bombings at the concert in the lap of Ariana Grande.
He's trying to get attention.
Yeah, he's trying to get attention. Don't reward him. I'm not going to read the rest of that. I am. Not because of it's you, but because, who cares? Milo, get the fuck out of here.
That's a formula. It's not an opinion.
Yeah, it's exactly. And I resent when I'm on my deathbed and I think of any minute that I spent in my life thinking about Milo Yiannopoulos that wasn't like directly getting me money, I'm going to resent. Looney Tune. Breaking, 2 bombs go off in the Jakarta train station. I think no one's covering it because it's a Muslim country. I guess also covering Trump, who looks happy to finally be back with white people around him in Europe. Ah, yeah. Beautiful white people. I mean, they're really great. Yeah.
It's like being back on planet Earth.
It's like being back with white people. It's just amazing. And the final I am of the day, Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Michael, I was just listening to a story about 2 Yazidi sisters, young teenagers who were kidnapped, enslaved, and abused and raped by ISIS combatants, but were actually able to amazingly escape. Basra and Badia are insisted that their voices must be heard, so I urge MR Crew listeners to check out their story for their sake. You can find it by looking up CBC Current Yazidi Sisters. Thank you. Stay sweet, MR Beauties. I will do that. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to
Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. Thanks so much and enjoy the show.